Every night, he walked the same dark sidewalks, pushing a rickety shopping cart that groaned with each step. He scavenged cans, cardboard, and forgotten scraps from the city. And every night, before ending his lonely shift, he stopped at the same spot, a hidden alley behind a closed-down supermarket. There, under flattened cardboard boxes, slept a little girl with thin legs and sad eyes who didn't speak and could barely walk. Physically disabled, abandoned, nobody knew her name. He didn't know where she came from, but he knew nobody cared for her, except him. Subscribe to the channel for heartwarming stories every day. The millionaire gazed at the view from the top floor of his private skyscraper. 50 stories of power, glass, and steel separated him from the rest of humanity. His fingers drummed impatiently on the polished surface of the mahogany desk as his secretary relayed the day's schedule. Meetings, mergers, numbers multiplying on high-definition screens, a life of empty achievements that didn't fill the nightly silence. "Cancel my appointments for this afternoon," he ordered with a dry voice, without taking his eyes off the window. Down below, the city pulsed like an alien organism. "I need to go to the lawyer's office." On the other side of the same city, the garbage collector woke up in the cramped back room of a cheap motel. His calloused hands rubbed his face, marked by time. They weren't wrinkles of age. He was only in his early 40s, but of a life, of hard labor under the sun and rain. A cup of cold black coffee and 2 stale crackers made up his breakfast. Before leaving, he held for a few moments the small, crumpled photo pinned to the peeling wall, the only colorful image in that gray environment, a smiling woman with dark hair, embracing him in better times. "Good morning, Mary," he whispered, as he did every morning, before putting a carefully prepared lunchbox in his backpack, enough food for 2 people. The day dragged on under a heavy sky that threatened rain. The garbage collector walked his usual routes, rummaged through dumpsters, separated recyclable materials, exchanged brief nods with other invisible workers of the streets. Every now and then, his eyes consulted the broken watch on his wrist, not to know the time, which was wrong, but to calculate how much time was left until nightfall. In his luxurious office, the millionaire listened impassively to the revelation that would change his life. "The documents were tampered with, sir," the lawyer explained, uncomfortable under the client's penetrating gaze. "We have substantial evidence that your daughter did not die at birth, as was reported 10 years ago. The child was taken from the hospital and given to third parties." An icy silence filled the room. The millionaire showed no emotion, although a storm was brewing inside him. Images of his wife, who died during the complex delivery, mingled with thoughts about the daughter he had never known. A daughter who, he had just discovered, might be alive somewhere. "I want you to find her," he said finally, his voice controlled, but implacable. "Use all resources. I don't care about the cost." Night came quickly, bringing with it a fine drizzle that made the streets even darker. The garbage collector hurried his pace, pushing his cart loaded with recyclables through narrow alleyways. The squeak of the wooden wheels echoed between the silent buildings, accompanied by the occasional clinking of aluminum cans. Finally, he arrived at the abandoned supermarket. He parked the cart against the wall, covered with faded graffiti, and took a small flashlight from his backpack. His heart raced as he illuminated the familiar corner, covered with carefully arranged cardboard boxes. "Little one, I'm here," he called softly. A subtle movement, and then 2 large, expressive eyes reflected the light of the flashlight. The girl, approximately 8 years old, smiled shyly, extending her thin arms. Her legs, visibly atrophied, remained motionless on the makeshift bed. "I brought your dinner," he said, kneeling next to the child. "Today we have rice, beans, and even a little piece of chicken. Are you hungry?" The garbage collector carefully unwrapped the lunchbox, separating the food into 2 unequal parts. The smaller for himself, the larger for the girl. Gently, he helped her sit up, supporting her fragile back against the cold wall. The child's fingers trembled slightly as they tried to hold the spoon. After a few frustrated attempts, the man intervened, feeding her with the patience of someone who deeply knows the meaning of waiting. Between spoonfuls, he told invented stories, simple fables about forest animals overcoming difficulties, about stars descending to Earth disguised as ordinary people to spread magic. The girl listened to everything with wide eyes, absorbing each word as if they were precious drops in a desert of silence. "You know what I think?" said the garbage collector, carefully wiping the corner of the little one's mouth. "I think you came from the stars. That's why your eyes shine so brightly in the dark." The child did not respond with words. She never had since he found her in that same alley, almost a year ago, more dead than alive, abandoned like a broken object. But her smile, rare and luminous, was answer enough. That night, however, something was different. The garbage collector sensed a presence even before hearing the soft engine of the car that parked near the alley. Instinctively, he positioned himself in front of the girl, protective as a cornered animal. His eyes scanned the darkness, seeking to identify the threat. The black and shiny vehicle contrasted completely with that decrepit environment. The tinted windows did not reveal who was inside, but the garbage collector knew they were being watched. His heart pounded. So many times he had feared this moment that the police or child protective services would discover the child and take her to some cold and overcrowded institution where she would be just another number, another lost case in the system. "Don't worry," he whispered to the girl who clung to his worn shirt, feeling the fear. "I won't let anyone hurt you." Inside the car, the millionaire remained motionless, his face partially illuminated by the bluish light of his cell phone, where old photos of his deceased wife were open. His eyes moved repeatedly between the digital images and the scene he was observing through the window. A dirty man, of exhausted appearance, caring with devotion for a clearly disabled child. "Should I intervene, sir?" asked the driver, who also performed security functions. The millionaire made a negative gesture, unable to take his eyes off the girl. There was something in that look, in that face shape, in the gentle curve of the smile he had just witnessed. Something painfully familiar that made his chest clench in a way he hadn't felt in 10 years. "Wait," he ordered simply. The rain intensified, turning the drizzle into a dense curtain that drummed on the car roof and the cardboard that the garbage collector was now positioning as protection over the girl. With experienced movements, he improvised a better shelter, using plastics and other materials he carried in his shopping cart. All the while, he kept a watchful eye on the mysterious vehicle. When he finally finished protecting the little one from the rain, he noticed that the car door had opened. An elegant figure, protected by an expensive umbrella, was heading towards them. The garbage collector stood up, instinctively placing himself between the stranger and the child. The millionaire stopped a few steps away. Water dripped off his imported overcoat, but he didn't seem to notice. His eyes were fixed on the girl, who was now peeking curiously from behind the protector. "Who are you?" asked the garbage collector, his voice hoarse with tension. The millionaire did not answer immediately. Ignoring the question, he took a step forward, getting closer to the child. Under the dim light of the distant lamppost, his eyes welled up. "She has her mother's eyes," he said finally, more to himself than as an answer. A gust of wind mixed with rain lashed the alley, scattering leaves and debris across the soaked ground. The garbage collector remained firm, like an old tree that had survived countless storms. "I don't know who you think you are," he said, his voice loaded with a rarely used strength, "but I ask you to step away." The millionaire seemed to awaken from a trance. He adjusted his posture, regaining the composure characteristic of someone who commands financial empires with a simple nod. "Forgive my intrusion," he replied with studied formality. "I don't intend to cause trouble. I just—" He hesitated, something rare in his personality. "She reminds me of someone." A dense silence settled between the two men, filled only by the sound of the rain and the girl's soft breathing. The garbage collector studied the stranger's face, trying to decipher his intentions. Years on the streets had given him a keen intuition about people. This man was not the police, nor from any government agency. The car, the clothes, the posture, everything screamed power and money, and that made him potentially more dangerous. "The girl is under my care," stated the garbage collector, trying to sound more confident than he really felt. "There's nothing for you here." The millionaire finally averted his gaze from the child and looked at the man in front of him. Tired but dignified eyes, worn but as clean as possible clothes, calloused hands that had so gently fed the little one moments before. "Are you her father?" he inquired, although he already knew the answer. "I'm all she has," replied the garbage collector without hesitation. The millionaire nodded slowly, processing that simple and profound answer. He took a business card from the inside pocket of his coat and extended it. "Take this, my name and contact information. I would like to talk in a more suitable place." He looked significantly at the girl shivering under the makeshift shelter. "About how I can help you." The garbage collector made no move to take the card, keeping his hands firmly at his side. "We don't need charity." "It's not charity I'm offering," retorted the millionaire, a slight tone of irritation permeating his controlled voice. He was used to being attended to immediately, not to having his offers rejected. "It's an opportunity. Opportunities like these usually come with a very high price for people like us," countered the garbage collector. The girl coughed, a weak sound that immediately redirected the attention of both men. The garbage collector knelt again beside her, checking her temperature with the back of his hand. She was hot, hotter than usual. The millionaire watched the scene with a mixture of emotions. Something about that child affected him in a way he couldn't rationally explain. And seeing the care of that simple man only intensified the internal conflict he felt. "She needs medical attention," he commented, keeping his voice neutral. "I know that," murmured the garbage collector, adjusting the makeshift blanket around. "The little one. I'll take her to the clinic again tomorrow." "Tomorrow may be too late," insisted the millionaire. "My personal doctor can examine her right now. I have a private clinic 10 minutes from here." The garbage collector looked at the girl, then at the stranger, torn between distrust and growing concern for the little one's health. The cough had worsened in recent weeks, and the generic medicines from the clinic seemed to have little effect. "Why do you care?" he asked finally, facing the millionaire. The answer came after a long moment of silence. "Because I have reason to believe she may be very important. To me." The garbage collector narrowed his eyes, protectively embracing the girl. "Important how?" The millionaire took a deep breath, considering how much he should reveal at that moment. He decided on the partial truth. "I'm looking for a child who was separated from me many years ago, and there are significant physical similarities." The garbage collector felt a chill run down his spine. Suddenly, the presence of that rich and powerful man represented a much more concrete threat. Not to his physical safety, but to the only effective bond he possessed in the world. "I'm not giving her up," he said, his voice low and determined. "No matter who you are or how much money you have." The rain increased in intensity, as did the girl's fever. The garbage collector felt the tremor in the small body and the heat emanating from her forehead. Signs he knew all too well. He had already lost a loved one to pneumonia. The ghost of that loss haunted him every rainy night. Like this. The millionaire perceived the change in the man's face. Years of negotiating in boardrooms had taught him to read human expressions minutely. That was the look of someone cornered between two impossibilities, distrust and need. "I'm not asking you to give her up," he said, softening his voice. "I'm offering immediate medical help. You can accompany her all the time. You have my word." The garbage collector hesitated. Words of rich men rarely meant anything on the streets, but when the girl coughed again, a wet, worrying sound, he knew he had no choice. "If you try anything," he began in a threatening tone. "I understand your concern," interrupted the millionaire, "but now every minute is valuable." With a reluctant nod, the garbage collector lifted the girl into his arms. She weighed frighteningly little for her estimated age. The millionaire opened the umbrella over both of them and guided them to the car, where the driver already held the back door open. The interior of the vehicle was another world. Soft leather, soft lights, the subtle aroma of fine wood and expensive perfume. The garbage collector sat uncomfortably, aware of the dirt on his clothes contrasting with the immaculate environment. But his attention soon returned to the child, who looked around with a mixture of fever and fascination. During the ride, the millionaire maintained a respectful distance, observing the interaction between the two. The garbage collector whispered words of comfort into the girl's ear, who clung to his shirt as if she feared being torn away from there at any moment. "What's her name?" asked the millionaire, breaking the tense silence. "She doesn't have an official name," replied the garbage collector, embarrassed. "I call her Little One." "And yours?" "They call me Pete on the streets, just Pete." Again, silence, filled only by the soft sound of the engine and the rain against the tinted windows. The private clinic was nothing like the overcrowded clinics the garbage collector knew. Spotless white walls, no patients in sight. Impeccably dressed nurses who showed no surprise at seeing the disparate trio entering the place. A man from the streets carrying a feverish girl, followed by one of the most powerful men in the city. The doctor, a middle-aged woman with kind but professional eyes, examined the child thoroughly. The garbage collector didn't take his eyes off her for a single second, alert to any sign of misconduct. But the professional proved competent and respectful, explaining each procedure before performing it. "Early-stage pneumonia," she diagnosed finally. "We need to start antibiotics immediately. And she's severely malnourished, with multiple vitamin deficiencies." What followed was a whirlwind of medical procedures: IV insertion, intravenous medication, blood collection for more detailed tests. At some point, another doctor, a specialist in orthopedic problems, was called to evaluate the girl's atrophied legs. The garbage collector watched everything with a mixture of gratitude and dread. Each machine, each exam, each new specialist called represented an astronomical sum of money that he could never pay, a debt that would certainly have a price beyond the financial. In an adjacent room, while the girl finally slept under the influence of the medications, the millionaire spoke in a low voice with the first doctor. The garbage collector couldn't hear, but he noticed the occasional glances cast in his direction. "You should rest too," suggested a nurse, offering him a glass of water. "There's a recliner next to her bed." Pete nodded, but had no intention of letting his guard down. When he returned to the room and sat next to the girl, he noticed a dark stain on his own wrist, dried blood. It wasn't his. It was the little one's who at some point during the night had grabbed his wrist so hard that her fragile nails had left semicircular marks on his skin. The millionaire quietly entered the room, watching the sleeping girl and the exhausted man who watched over her sleep. "The first test results will be out in the morning," he informed in a low voice. "I suggest you get some rest." "Why are you doing this?" asked the garbage collector directly. "The truth." The millionaire assessed the man in front of him. Despite the evident exhaustion, the garbage collector's eyes maintained an impressive lucidity and determination. Lying would be useless. 10 years ago, "My wife died during the birth of our first daughter," he began, sitting in the opposite chair. "I was told that the child didn't survive either. A double tragedy that destroyed part of me." He paused, his gaze momentarily lost in painful memories. "Recently, I discovered evidence that my daughter did not die, that she was taken from the hospital and given to third parties as part of a criminal scheme involving illegal adoptions." The garbage collector listened in silence, his face impassive, although his heart raced. "I hired investigators, mobilized resources, and then tonight, following a lead about an abandoned child with specific physical characteristics, I found you." "And you think little one," began the garbage collector, his voice failing. "I'm not sure," admitted the millionaire, "but there are remarkable similarities with my deceased wife. The shape of the eyes, some expressions, and the age would match." Pete turned to the sleeping girl, connected to tubes and monitors that beeped softly. Something in his chest contracted painfully. For so long, she had been his only reason to keep going, to get up every morning, to endure the contempt and social invisibility. The idea of losing her was unbearable. "And if it's her?" he asked, his voice low and hoarse. "What do you intend to do?" The millionaire sighed deeply. "What any father would do, offer her the home, the care, and the opportunities she deserves." "She already has a home," retorted the garbage collector. "With me." A palpable tension settled between the two men, two worlds colliding around a small, fragile life. "An alley is not a home," replied the millionaire, controlling his tone so as not to sound condescending. "Not for you, nor for her." The garbage collector swallowed the harsh response that rose to his throat. Deep down, he knew the other was right. How many nights had he spent awake, tormented by the guilt of not being able to offer the girl the comfort and security she deserved? How many times had he dreamed of a different life for both of them? "The DNA tests will bring the truth," continued the millionaire. "If she is my biological daughter, I have legal rights over her. And if she isn't?" challenged Pete. The millionaire did not answer immediately. He looked at the girl, at the equipment that monitored her vital signs, at the high-standard clinical environment that represented only a fraction of the resources he could mobilize. "Even so, she needs ongoing medical treatment," he said finally. "The preliminary assessments indicate that her legs could have partial function with appropriate physical therapy, corrective surgeries, things you can afford and I can't," completed the garbage collector bitterly. "Yes." The raw sincerity of the answer surprised Pete. No attempt to disguise the truth with euphemisms or false promises, just the naked reality of the inequalities that governed their lives. The rising sun began to penetrate through the blinds of the hospital room when a nurse entered bringing preliminary results. She handed the envelope to the millionaire, who opened it with slightly trembling fingers. His eyes quickly scanned the technical information, stopping on a specific paragraph. His face visibly paled. "What does it say?" asked Pete, rising tensely. The millionaire handed him the document. The garbage collector looked at the incomprehensible numbers and medical terms. "I don't understand." "The blood type is compatible," explained the millionaire, "and there are preliminary genetic markers that strongly suggest a paternal relationship." Pete felt as if the ground disappeared beneath his feet. For an entire year, that child had been his only anchor in a world that rejected him. Now, in a matter of hours, he was about to lose her forever. "We need more specific tests to confirm without a shadow of a doubt," continued the millionaire, his professional voice masking the emotional storm he felt. "But the probability is high." At that moment, the girl opened her eyes, her gaze still Feverish, moved disorientedly around the unfamiliar environment until it found the familiar face of the garbage collector. Immediately, her lips curved into a weak smile and her small hand extended towards him. Pete held those fragile fingers between his, unable to contain the tears that now flowed freely down his marked face. "I'm here, little one," he murmured. His voice choked. "I'm always here." 3 days passed like a strange interlude suspended in time. The girl responded well to the treatment, her fever gradually subsiding under the effect of the potent antibiotics. The garbage collector remained at her side almost constantly, leaving only for brief moments of personal hygiene in the clinic's facilities. The millionaire, in turn, divided his time between his unpostponable business obligations and frequent visits to the hospital room. On each visit, he brought a small gift, an illustrated book, a stuffed animal, a music box that played a soft melody, gifts that the girl received with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. It was on the 4th day that the responsible doctor summoned both men to a meeting in her office. On the glass table, a folder containing the definitive results of the genetic tests awaited. The results confirm with 99.9998% certainty, announced the professional, maintaining a neutral tone appropriate to the delicate situation. "There is a paternal relationship between you," she looked at the millionaire, "and the child." Even expecting this confirmation, the impact of the news was visceral. The millionaire closed his eyes for a moment, processing the whirlwind of emotions. His daughter was alive, the daughter he believed he had lost along with the woman he loved. 10 years of mourning, anger, and emptiness. And now this. The garbage collector remained silent, his face an indecipherable mask of contained pain. "We also have the results of the complete tests on her physical condition," continued the doctor, opening another file. "The girl presents a form of partial paralysis in her lower limbs that appears to be an acquired condition, not congenital. Probably the result of severe malnutrition and lack of adequate stimulation during the first years of development." "Does that mean," began the millionaire, "that with intensive treatment, specialized physical therapy, possible surgical interventions, and rigorous nutritional monitoring, there is a significant chance of partial recovery of mobility?" she explained. "I can't promise she'll walk normally, but I believe we can achieve a substantial improvement in her quality of life." The garbage collector absorbed that information with growing anguish. Each word of the doctor was another nail in the coffin of his hope of keeping the girl with him. How could he compete with everything the true biological father could offer? When can she be discharged?" he asked finally, his voice insecure. "In approximately a week, if she continues to respond well to treatment," replied the doctor. "But she will need continuous follow-up." After the meeting, the two men walked in silence through the immaculate corridor of the clinic, each lost in his own thoughts. It was the millionaire who spoke first. "I need to legally register her as my daughter," he declared, his tone firm but not aggressive. "It's a right I cannot give up." The garbage collector nodded slowly. He already expected that. And then... The millionaire hesitated, searching for the right words. "Then she'll need a suitable home, an environment that can meet all her needs." The garbage collector felt the blow, even though it was delivered with kid gloves. The meaning was crystal clear. The girl would go to the millionaire's mansion, to the world to which she belonged by blood, leaving behind the man who had saved her from certain death. "I understand," he murmured, his throat suddenly dry. They arrived at the door of the room where the little one rested. Through the glass, they could see her playing timidly with the nurse, who was showing her how to make simple origami with colored paper. Her smile, still rare, illuminated the sterilized environment. "I'll get some coffee," said the garbage collector, unable to enter at that moment, fearing that his face would betray the inner devastation. As he walked down the corridor towards the coffee machine, he felt his cell phone, a simple device that the millionaire had insisted on giving him to keep in touch, vibrate in his pocket. The number was unknown. "Hello," he answered suspiciously. "Mr. Pete?" The voice on the other side was grave, professional. "This is Dr. Marcos, attorney for Mr. Leopold Noguera." The garbage collector took a few seconds to associate the formal name with the millionaire. "Yes? I'm calling to inform you that we have already filed the papers for the minor's civil registration and formal recognition of paternity. However, there is a complication that I need to discuss with you personally." "Complication?" repeated Pete, feeling a flicker of irrational hope. "I prefer not to go into details over the phone," replied the lawyer. "Could you come to my office tomorrow at 10 a.m.? Before he could answer, a commotion caught his attention. Doctors and nurses were running towards the girl's room. His heart leaped. "I have to go," he said hastily, already running back. Arriving, he found the little one convulsing in bed, eyes rolled back, while the medical team worked quickly around her. The millionaire was pushed back in a corner, his face pale with horror. Pete tried to approach, but was restrained by a clinic security guard. "Let the doctors work, sir," said the man, blocking his path with a strong arm. "She needs me," protested Pete, trying to break free. At that moment, the girl's weak, fragmented voice cut through the air like a razor. Daddy!" It was the first word any of them had ever heard her speak. The seizure was controlled, but it left everyone shaken. The doctor explained that it was not an uncommon reaction in debilitated patients undergoing intensive treatment, but the tests revealed something more worrying, an adverse reaction to one of the medications administered. "We need to change the protocol," explained the doctor, readjusting the chart, "and monitor her more closely for the next 48 hours. Pete and the millionaire remained in the room, one on each side of the bed, like silent sentinels. The girl had gone back to sleep, sedated, with her breathing still irregular. Neither of them mentioned the word she had spoken, but it hung between them like a ghost impossible to ignore. The next morning, while the little one slept under sedation, Pete headed to the lawyer's office. The glass building in the city's financial district was as intimidating as he expected, a monument to the wealth and power to which he had never had access. He was greeted with professional courtesy and led to a meeting room where, to his surprise, the millionaire was already waiting. For him, the businessman seemed to have aged years in a single night, with deep dark circles under his eyes and a grave demeanor. "Mr. Pete," began the lawyer after the formal introductions, "I called this meeting because legal complications have arisen in our process of regularizing the minor's custody." He opened a folder on the table and removed some documents. "When we started searching the birth and missing children records from that time, we found something disturbing." He paused, looking directly at the garbage collector. "It appears that the child in question, after her disappearance from the maternity ward, was given to a couple whose description matches perfectly you and your wife." Pete felt the blood run cold in his veins. How could they know about Mary? "My wife passed away 7 years ago," he replied tensely, "and we never adopted any children, legally or not." "But you knew her, didn't you?" insisted the lawyer. "Knew who?" asked Pete, genuinely confused. "Nurse Helena Vasconcelos, the woman who gave the newborn to the couple." Pete visibly shuddered at the sound of that name. The millionaire, until then silent, leaned forward, noticing his reaction. "Helena was an acquaintance of my wife," admitted the garbage collector reluctantly. "She worked at the university hospital. Sometimes she came to dinner at our house." "The same hospital where Mr. Leopold's daughter was born and supposedly died," added the lawyer. "A remarkable coincidence, don't you think?" Pete felt the room spin around him. Fragments of long-suppressed memories began to emerge. A rainy night, Mary entering the house, with a bundle in her arms, tears streaming down her face. Helena at her side, both whispering about doing the right thing. "I didn't know," he murmured, more to himself than to the others present. "Mary never told me. She said the child was from a distant cousin who had died in childbirth, that we needed to protect her." The silence that followed was dense as lead. The millionaire rose slowly, approaching the window that offered a panoramic view of the city. When he finally spoke, his voice was controlled but trembling with contained emotion. "My wife, Elisa, died during childbirth due to complications, or at least that's what I was told. The responsible doctor, Dr. Garcia, gave me the child's death certificate, claiming that she hadn't survived. I buried an empty coffin." His voice faltered momentarily, "believing that my daughter was in there." He turned to face Pete. "Years later, I discovered that Dr. Garcia was involved in a scheme to traffic newborns, children from wealthy or influential families who, for some reason, were declared dead and sold or given to third parties, some for money, others for ideology." Pete felt his stomach sink as he understood the complete picture. Mary, his sweet Mary, always so indignant about social injustices, always talking about how wealth corrupted people. "Nurse Helena was known for her radical political convictions," continued the lawyer. "She believed that children from affluent families should be redistributed to families she considered more deserving. A distorted view of social justice. Apparently your wife shared those ideas." "No," protested Pete, rising. "Mary would never participate in something like that. She was compassionate, not criminal." "And yet," retorted the lawyer coldly, "the evidence suggests otherwise. You and your wife are legally complicit in the kidnapping of Mr. Leopold's daughter." The accusation hung in the air like an axe suspended over his neck. Pete felt the overwhelming weight of the legal implications. He would not only lose the girl, but could face years in prison. "I didn't know," he repeated, his voice almost inaudible. "When Mary died, the girl was only 3 years old. She got very sick after that. She stopped talking, stopped walking. The doctors said it was psychological trauma. I had no way to support her alone. I lost my job, then the house, and ended up on the streets," completed the millionaire, his expression unreadable. Pete nodded, unable to continue. Tears were flowing freely now. "A year ago, when her situation worsened, you abandoned the child," said the lawyer, consulting his notes. "No!" exclaimed Pete with renewed vehemence. "I never abandoned her. She was taken from me. One day I returned to our temporary shelter and she simply wasn't there. I searched for months in every possible place. When I finally found her in that alley, she was almost dead, unrecognizable." The millionaire and the lawyer exchanged meaningful glances. There was more to this story than they initially suspected. "Mr. Pete," said the lawyer after a pause, "regardless of your intentions, the fact is that you are implicated in a serious crime, and Mr. Leopold has all the legal rights over the child." "What's going to happen to me?" asked Pete, defeated. "That," replied the millionaire, resuming his place at the table, "will depend on your cooperation from here on out." The private clinic, with its silent corridors and immaculate walls, became a strange limbo for Pete. During the day, he remained at the girl's side, watching her gradual physical recovery. At night, he was led to an adjacent room, where he slept under the discreet surveillance of security guards hired by the millionaire. He wasn't exactly a prisoner, but he wasn't free either. His legal situation remained in a nebulous state of suspension, neither formally accused nor acquitted. The little one, in turn, began to show signs of surprising progress. After the initial word, others began to emerge, hesitant, whispered, like birds trying wings that had long been folded. The doctors explained that she possibly always had the ability to speak, but the severe trauma had silenced her. "Trauma caused by me," hammered Pete into his conscience, consumed by the guilt of not having realized the truth about the girls' origins, of not having questioned more the story told by Mary, of not having been able to adequately protect the child after his wife's death. One particularly sunny afternoon, while a specialized physical therapist was working with the girl's legs through playful exercises, the millionaire entered the room. It wasn't uncommon to see him there. He came regularly, always bringing some gift, always trying to establish a connection with his newfound daughter. What was uncommon, however, was the envelope he carried in his hands. "I need to talk to you," he said to Pete, indicating the hallway with a discreet gesture. "Outside the room," he handed him the envelope. Inside, Pete found official documents that he couldn't fully understand, but recognized judicial stamps and legal terms. "What is this?" he asked, confused. "A proposal," replied the millionaire, his voice controlled but tense. "Prepared by my lawyers and already presented to the judge responsible for the case." Pete examined the papers more closely, trying to decipher the complex legal language. "In simple terms," continued the businessman, "I am requesting shared custody of my daughter." Pete raised his eyes, astonished. "Shared? Between us two?" The millionaire nodded gravely. "But why? You have every legal right to her. You can send me to prison. You can keep her exclusively." "I can," agreed the other man. "Legally, I have all those options, but would they be the best for her?" He indicated the physical therapist working patiently with the girl through the glass window. "She has been through traumas that we can't even imagine," he continued. "She lost her biological mother at birth. She lost her adoptive mother at 3 years old. She was torn from the only father she knew, lived on the streets, almost died. And now, finally, she has found you again." He paused, carefully choosing his next words. "I've watched you two during these weeks. I've seen how she lights up when you enter the room, how she seeks your approval before trying something new, how she calms down with the sound of your voice." Pete felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Taking you away from her now would be just another trauma, another loss," concluded the millionaire. "I can't do that to her, even though I have every right to. But I participated, even without knowing it, in a crime against you," argued Pete, incredulous at the direction of the conversation. "You were also a victim," countered the millionaire, "deceived by the woman you loved. And then, when everything fell apart, you did what few would do. Sacrificed everything to protect a child who wasn't even yours by blood." Pete lowered his eyes, unable to fully process that unexpected turn of events. How would this work?" he asked finally. "You would come to live on my property," explained the millionaire. "There is a guest house in the back of the grounds. Small, but comfortable. You would have your independence, but you would always be close to her. And in return, you would continue to be what you have always been to her, a father figure, a pillar of stability." Pete laughed humorlessly. "A garbage collector living on the property of one of the richest men in the city. People will talk." "Let them talk," replied the millionaire with a shrug. "They've talked about me my whole life. Besides, you won't need to collect garbage anymore." "I don't accept charity," protested Pete automatically. "It's not charity, it's a job offer," corrected the other. "My company has a social responsibility department that implements recycling projects and inclusion of informal workers. Someone with your practical knowledge would be a valuable consultant." Pete stared at the man in front of him with new understanding. This was no longer the arrogant millionaire he had met weeks ago, but a father willing to make any sacrifice for the well-being of his daughter, exactly like himself. "Why are you really doing this?" he asked, still suspicious. The millionaire averted his gaze to the girl in the room. Because when I saw her talking to you that night during the seizure, I realized something that should have been obvious from the beginning. She already has a father, and it's not me." He took a deep breath before continuing. "I'm just a stranger with the same blood. I can become her father over time, maybe, but you already are, and that's not something that money can buy or that the law can determine." Pete felt a wave of gratitude and respect flood his chest. He extended his trembling hand to the other man. "Thank you," he said simply. The millionaire shook his hand firmly. "It's what Elisa would have done," he replied with a sad smile. "She always believed that family goes far beyond blood." The transition was not easy for any of them. The girl, now officially registered as Sophia, showed an understandable confusion in the face of rapid changes in her world. One day she was sleeping on damp cardboard. The next, she was surrounded by state-of-the-art medical equipment, and soon after transferred to a mansion with more rooms than she could count. "It's too much for her to assimilate all at once," explained the child psychologist hired to follow the case. "We need to create a stable routine with constant figures around her." Pete settled into the guest house, as agreed. The space, which the millionaire had described as small, was larger than any place he had lived in recent years. Soft bed, unlimited hot water, a constantly stocked refrigerator. Simple luxuries that now seemed almost unreal. He slowly adapted to the new job in the company's social responsibility department. His practical ideas on how to improve the conditions of garbage collectors and implement more efficient selective collection systems were received with genuine interest. Gradually, he discovered that he had value beyond the strength of his arms. That his experience and perspective were valuable resources. The millionaire, in turn, completely reorganized his life. He transferred important meetings to video conferences, delegated trips to subordinates, drastically reduced his workload to be present during his daughter's adaptation. His advisors and shareholders did not hide their concern with this radical change, but he remained adamant. "I spent 10 years building an empire for an heiress I believed to be dead," he said at a tense board meeting. "Now that I've found her, I'm not going to waste another day of her life." Sophia, in turn, blossomed. Under the intensive care, the initial surgeries on her legs had been successful, and she was now able to stand with the support of special crutches. Her voice, once practically non-existent, grew stronger every day, although she still spoke little and selectively. But not everything was progress and harmony. The unusual arrangement soon reached the tabloids and social media. "Millionaire takes in homeless man to his mansion" was only the gentlest headline. Photographers surrounded the gates of the property. Reporters tried to intercept Pete on his outings. Internet commentators speculated about the true motivations of this bizarre situation. "It must be some kind of social experiment," said some. "I bet it's just publicity to clean up the company's image," claimed others. "Probably a strategy to avoid a lawsuit for negligence," theorized the more cynical. The millionaire seemed immune to external criticism. Years in the corporate world had shielded him from public opinion. Pete, however, felt increasingly out of place, an intruder in a world that clearly did not accept him. The tension reached its peak at a luxurious charity gala held at the mansion, an annual event that the millionaire had chosen to maintain, despite the extraordinary circumstances. Pete had hesitated to participate, but Sophia had insisted, clinging to his hand with that pleading look that he had never been able to refuse. The girl was stunning in a light blue dress, specially designed to accommodate her physical limitations. Sitting in her adapted wheelchair, used for longer distances, while she practiced with crutches at home, she watched with fascination the elegant guests who circulated through the mansion's spacious hall. Pete, uncomfortable in a borrowed suit, kept to a corner trying to go unnoticed. He could feel the curious glances, hear the poorly disguised whispers. It's him, the garbage collector, the trash man. At one point, a visibly intoxicated businessman approached, his face flushed with indignation. "It's really impressive," he said loudly enough for several guests to hear, "how some manage to strike gold in increasingly creative ways." Pete stiffened, but remained silent. "Using a disabled child as an entry into high society," continued the man, swirling the whiskey in his glass. "You have to admit it was clever. Old Leopold has always been a softy behind that shark of a businessman facade." Some guests moved away, embarrassed. Others approached, drawn by the potential scandal. Pete remained still, his fists clenched, fighting the urge to respond to the provocation. "I just wonder how long it will take for you to mess it all up," continued the drunk. "People like you always show their true colors eventually." "People like who, exactly?" The millionaire's voice cut through the air like an ice blade. He had approached without anyone noticing, and now faced the insolent guest with a look that could freeze hell. "Leopold!" exclaimed the man, trying to back away. "I was just chatting with your guest." "I heard clearly what you were saying," replied the millionaire, his voice dangerously calm. "And I'm curious to know what you meant by people like him." An uncomfortable silence spread through the hall. The music continued, but the conversations had ceased. "Come on, Ricardo, clarify it for all of us," insisted the millionaire. "People like who? Workers? People who have lived on the streets? Or maybe you're referring to people with moral integrity, something you clearly wouldn't recognize, even if it was stamped on your bank statement." The man stammered some incoherent excuse, but the millionaire had already turned to the other. "And guests, ladies and gentlemen, I ask for your attention for a moment," he announced, his voice resonating through the hall. "I believe I owe everyone an explanation." The entire hall seemed to have frozen. All eyes converged on the millionaire, who now walked to where Sophia watched everything with wide eyes in her wheelchair. He positioned himself behind her, his hands gently resting on her small shoulders. "Many of you have speculated about my decision to welcome Pete and my daughter Sophia," he began, his voice calm but firm. "Some out of genuine concern, others out of mere curiosity, and some," he cast a sharp look at the intoxicated guest, "out of malice disguised as concern." He paused, his eyes scanning the attentive faces. The truth rarely fits into sensationalist headlines or hallway conversations. The truth is that this extraordinary child, he gently squeezed Sophia's shoulders, is my biological daughter, who was stolen from me at birth through a criminal scheme. Surprised murmurs spread through the hall. For 10 years, I believed that she had died along with my wife. 10 lost years, which no fortune can ever recover. His voice faltered slightly, but he continued. "When I finally found her, she wasn't alone. She was under the care of this man," he indicated Pete with a respectful gesture, "who, without any blood or legal obligation, chose to protect her and love her when the whole world had turned its back on her." Pete lowered his eyes, uncomfortable with the sudden attention. Sophia extended her hand, seeking his, finding it in the air as if they had an invisible radar that always connected them. "I could have used my power and influence to keep him away from her," continued the millionaire. "Legally, it would be my right. But what kind of man would I be if I tore this child away from the only father she truly knew? What kind of example would I be giving about the meaning of family, love, and responsibility?" The silence was absolute now. Even the music had ceased. "So, to answer the unspoken question that hangs in the air, yes, this is an unusual situation. Yes, we are redefining the traditional concept of family. And no, I don't care even a little about what you think about it." At this moment, Sophia surprised everyone, including her two fathers, by pulling the microphone that the millionaire was holding. "I have two daddies," she said, her voice small but clear, provoking audible gasps of surprise among the guests. One who gave me life and one who didn't let me lose it. The impact of those simple words, spoken by a child until recently mute, was overwhelming. The millionaire himself seemed astonished by his daughter's unexpected eloquence. And now, continued Sophia, gaining confidence, they are not fighting for me anymore, but fighting with me. It's different. Pete felt silent tears streaming down his face, unable to contain them. The millionaire was not in better shape, although he tried to maintain composure. Sophia, in turn, thrived under the intensive care. The initial surgeries on her legs had been successful, and she was now able to stand with the support of special crutches. Her voice, once practically non-existent, grew stronger every day, although she still spoke little and selectively. But not everything was progress and harmony. The unusual arrangement continued to attract attention, but in a different way. Serious journalists began to follow the development of the foundation and Sophia's medical progress. Television shows invited Pete and the millionaire to discuss issues of unconventional parenting and social responsibility. The girl, in turn, progressed in ways that surprised even the most optimistic doctors. After the third corrective surgery, she managed to take her first steps without support, still unsteady but autonomous. Her vocabulary expanded rapidly, as if trying to recover all the years of forced silence. The guest house eventually became empty. A new room was prepared for Pete in the main house, closer to Sophia's, who frequently had nightmares and needed the comforting presence of her father figures. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, a year after the initial meeting in the dark alley, the three rested in the mansion's spacious garden. Sophia practiced her careful steps on the grass, alternating between short, independent walks and moments of rest. Pete and the millionaire watched, side by side, in a rare truce in their everyday differences. "Sometimes I wonder," said Pete thoughtfully, "what Mary would think of all this, if she knew what her decision would result in." "I think she would be proud," replied the millionaire after a reflective pause, "not of the lie or the crime, but of seeing that her distorted attempt to do justice ended up, in a way, creating something good." "How so?" "Well, she believed that I, as a rich man, would not deserve a daughter, that you, as a simpler and good-hearted man, would be a better father." "And I was a terrible father," admitted Pete bitterly. "Unable to keep her safe, to give her the basics. You were the best possible father in the worst imaginable circumstances," corrected the millionaire. "And I didn't have a chance to be a father at all. Until now." Sophia approached, tired of her exercises, and sat between the two men, on the grass. Without hesitation, she rested her head on Pete's shoulder and reached out to hold the millionaire's hand. "Daddy and Daddy," she said simply, closing her eyes with a contented smile. The two men exchanged glances over the child's head, glances that transcended words, social classes, life stories. At that moment, they were just two fathers united by love for a daughter who, against all odds, had found her way back home. On the sidewalk where Sophia once slept, there was now a small, discreet plaque, seen only by those who really paid attention. Here was born a love that not even fate could throw away. The New Paths Foundation had already rescued dozens of children in similar situations. Each of them received on the first day a small stuffed animal and a card written by Sophia with her still childish handwriting. "Family is not just who made you be born, it's who helps you to live." If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to receive new stories every day.